This is Learn from Others, where we interview a cross-section of successful individuals so you can learn from their experiences, achievements, and even their mistakes. We ask 4 questions that will educate and inspire. Greg Stanley will be your guide as we join our guest on a journey from adolescent daydreaming to success in today's world. Join us on this adventure as we learn from others together.
Welcome to Learn from Others. This is Greg Stanley, and I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Kenny Hamilton. Kenny, how you doing?
I'm great. Yourself?
I'm doing good, and thank you for taking us on your career journey today, which I'm very interested to hear more about. Let's start at the beginning. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Really, music's been there since I was 10, I guess.
Now, did you always play music back then? Like, when it was the first time you started playing music?
Playing music, I started in 7th grade. I got a drum kit when I was 10. I didn't really mess around on it, and then went to a football game one day, and the drum line was playing a cadence, and I just heard it, went home, played it, and then everybody came running in going, "What are you doing? How'd you learn that?" I just heard it, man. They were like, "Oh, okay, we'll do more." I was like, "Okay." So I just went from there, man. One day I started playing after I heard a drum line cadence, and that was it.
That's cool. Now, what was your first job that you ever did, whether, mowing lawns or an actual paid job?
The first job I ever had was IHOP.
IHOP, really?
Boy. Yeah, I 15 years old, too. I had to get special permission. There's the one right here on Bay Meadows Road.
Yep.
I guess it's IHOB now. But, I had to get special permission and all that kind of stuff. But it was actually not a bad. It was a tough job. Geez, it was a lot of work, man. But the manager was actually nice.
Oh, that's cool.
So it made the job all that less what I realized it could be these days.
Right. Yeah, I worked as a busboy for about 2 weeks and realized I didn't like this.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, man. Actually, that was waiter for me.
Yeah.
When I got back from Miami, I was like, I'll just be a waiter for a while, and I went to Applebee's for 2 weeks and thought, never will I do this ever again.
So what was your favorite, and I can guess the answer on this, but what was your favorite subject or hobby in school?
Jazz band, probably. Either that or lunch. No. Yeah, probably. Don Zance, you guys. It's probably the closest knit group I had of people who actually wanted to sound good, at that time.
Yeah, and just for a little background for those that don't know us, we were in high school jazz band together, symphony band together, and it was a great kind of special time. It was a lot of fun. It was one of my highlights as well.
It was. That was not just a good band. It was a great band for high school. We used to win all kinds of stuff, man. We used to win competitions, and then we had superiors at state. You know how hard that is. And that was a very, very good band, man. That's what I remember.
Yeah, I remember that fondly, and also playing in the side tent at the Jacksonville Jazz Festival.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
I don't think we were very good, but it was nice to do that.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
All in perspective, we were very good for a high school jazz band, so.
Yeah.
Well, so now we know what you wanted to be when you grew up. Now tell us, what are you doing today? And if you would, walk us through how you got there.
Today, I currently teach at a place called Music and Arts. I teach saxophone, flute, and clarinet. I play in a wedding band called Bread and Butter, and we play lots of weddings and lots of corporate events. And I have my own original groups. I have a group like a funk, jazzy fusion group. Not really jazzy, but it's mostly just funk and a lot of fusion, called Centropolis, which I formed about 10 years ago. And I also have my own thing, which is a smooth jazz thing where I'm more marketing. Centropolis is the kind of thing where you just write whatever comes to your mind or whatever you think. There is no limit in Centropolis. With the smooth jazz, I got to market it a certain way in order for it to fit in, but it's really for just something to have online so I can kind of get some revolving, flow going. Now, it's kind of how you got to work it these days,
Right. Now, is that all music you've composed yourself and performed?
Yeah, Centropolis and this new stuff is all my own original stuff. You really don't want to put out anybody else's music as far as going, when you write albums going on, unless you're established and you really want to put somebody else's stuff on there, that's cool. But I actually tried to do If You Want Me to Stay by Sly and the Family Stone on my first Centropolis album.
Yep.
And the copyrights were so expensive, I couldn't believe it. They wanted $500 every 500 copies sold.
Wow.
And I was like, Jesus, that's like $1 a copy.
Right.
They're like, yep. I was like, oh my God. Well, maybe I'll leave this one off. the record. He was like, "Do you really need the lawyer, Carolyn Herman?" She's like, "Do you really need the song on there?" I was like, "Well, it turned out awesome, man. I mean, it was one of the songs I was really proud of that we actually did, because if you do a Sly song, you better do it right."
Right.
So I thought, man, this thing turned out great, and then we had to keep it up. So that's how it goes.
Now, you're also touring with a band, or will be touring with a band, is that right?
Yes, I tour with a band called J.J. Gray and MoFro. I am a permanent member, but as far as me being on the road all the time with them, I only do gigs when they're close around the southeast U.S. region at the moment, because they only have one bus and they got 12 people on the bus. So if they want another horn player, they would have to add, well, if they want more people, then they have to add another bus. But if I were to go on there and tour, there would be no bed for me. And it really comes down to that. It's simple as that. So every time I'm here, they're like, come play. And then when they're on the road, they're like, ugh. And if they had, I played Red Rocks in Colorado the past 2 years with them, and that was a bucket list thing.
Oh,
and we headlined as well. So we got a little award that's actually made out of the rock.
Oh, wow.
For you every time you headline. So it's pretty cool. You get a piece. They call it getting a piece of the rock.
Nice. Wow.
So it was fun. Yeah, I toured those guys. Next year, JJ's got a few things to do. He's got to finish this house he's building, plus he's got to finish the album, and I'm really looking forward to that. I'll make sure everybody knows that's out when it's out, because it's good. And then after that, he'll get another bus, and I'll be part of the crew.
Right. That's awesome. Well, now tell us how you got there, because when we spoke earlier, I think you mentioned you were on a cruise ship for like 5 years, and then I know you played with Casey and the Sunshine Band. Just kind of walk us through how you got to where you are today. And I am fascinated by working on a cruise ship, as I'm sure other people are.
Yes. Let's see. Before cruise ships, only 24. I think I was 22 when I went on cruise ships. And I was just out of high school, and I had been delivering pizza for a couple of years. And then a friend told me about a cruise ship gig. I was like, well, that's better than this. And so he said, yeah, here's the number. I called the number. Really, that was it. I mean, they just said, hey, come on out. And the first gig I ever did was about a 3-week stint. And then immediately when the gig was almost about the day before the gig, he came up to me and he was like, hey, they got another gig for you. If you want to do this, you can do this. And then I said, okay. So I went home for maybe 3-4 months. The scene was not too happening there. So I was like, well, looks like I'm going back out on the ship. So I got on the cruise ship, and it felt like heaven to me.
Right. So on the cruise ship,
like that. Well, I'd never traveled, and I'd never been out anywhere like that. And plus, I got to play real shows and, sight read and really get on-the-job experience.
So on the cruise ship, you're playing saxophone, correct? Tenor sax?
I was playing everything. It was tenor, alto, flute, clarinet, piccolo.
Wow. Okay. So you had a performance every night, or was it kind of every other night? How'd that work? Multiple?
You played every night. Beginning of the cruise, you played, like, the first night you played 2 shows. Then the second night you played 2 it's not really shows. Some of them are comedians. Some of them are singers.
Right.
But during the week, there are 2 production shows, like one on Tuesday and one on Friday, if you have a week-long cruise. And then there's 2 shows each night. So then you'll do 2 production shows there. And I guess the captain's day is the busiest day. You got to do 2 cocktail sets, plus 2 shows, plus a midnight special. So that's the busiest day you have. And then the next week, we'd have a day off. I mean, the next day. So
you went bouncing around the Caribbean for 5 years? Is that right?
Not just Alaska. And then from Alaska, we sailed coast. San Francisco and LA, and then we did South America, Mexico, we went to Florida and Mazatlan. We went Zihuatanejo, we did that on Rita, and then we went through the Panama Canal, and then to it's just a relocation thing.
Yeah, wow.
To Europe.
Well, then you really did see a lot of the world on that gig.
Yeah, that was the first big travel gig I ever had.
Wow.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Great on-the-job education as well, especially with the sight reading, like you
said.
Yeah,
lots of reading and lots of learning of songs, old songs, new songs, all of that, just a complete education.
Right. Okay. Well, cool. Now, what did you do after the cruise ship?
After cruise ships, I went to college. That was another amazing experience. I got to study with Bunky Green and Bill Prince and Barry Green and all of those guys that are just way, many levels above my ability. But yeah, let me see. After I went to college, I was right around 2001, 2002. I think it was Anchored UNF. I went to FCCJ right around 98, 97. Probably going there the first few years to to UNF.
Right.
Because they had amazing teachers, really good, very hands-on too. They were cool. And then after that, I was more than prepared going to UNF. So then I went to UNF, and it was all day just practicing and playing, and a lot of work. And after that, it was a bit of a dead period, not too long, maybe a year and a half, 2 years.
So what was your first tour gig?
Well, a couple of years after that, I met a guy named John Reed, who was already in the band. Him and his brother, Steve Reed. They're two of the probably most amazing lead players in the nation. I became friends with John Reed, started getting him some gigs, and he was like, yeah, we became friends. He was like, man, you sound good, blah, blah, blah. I was like, hey, you ever need a player in the Sunshine Band? Yeah. And say about 6 months later, Saxophone decided he was leaving, and he called me up, and I said, great. And just Key Largo an audition. I was like, Key Largo? Jesus. So I said, okay. So I drove all the way down to Key Largo, and I get there, and it turns out there's another sax player there, Phil Doyle, who is another amazing player. So I was like, hey, whatever. At this point, I'm just like, whatever. Let's just play, audition, let me get out of here. So
Right.
Get in there. It's the most, I never, all my years in the band, I never saw them audition players like they did me and the sax player. It was just a weird, that band was weird anyway. It was just a weird audition, a weird way they did it.
Right.
And so we auditioned, we battle it out, and I beat the guy. I know I did, but the guy's tall and skinny, and I'm not. So image plays factor and everything. So he got the gig out of looks and basically flaked out. After about a year and a half, he was a flake. So I told him, I was like, I'm not auditioning, so you can have me or not. You know how I play. You know I can play the gig, but I'm not auditioning. So they're like, okay. So I went in there and stayed there for 5 years, 4 or 5 years.
So and that
cool.
was all U.S. travel, or did you get some more international travel with the Casey and the Sunshine Band?
Absolutely, man. I went to every single state in the U.S., plus we did a lot of South America, a bit of Europe, lots and lots of Canada. Yeah, it was really, really, really fun.
I have to ask this. Do you ever get sick of playing the same stuff?
It doesn't matter to me if it's good. If it's really good music, then I'm fine. I loved Casey's music when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody that, but I loved it when I was a kid. So playing it was like, oh man, I always knew it might be a possibility that I could play for that band one day, but I didn't realize until I met John going, oh, here it is. Okay, let me try.
Right.
You know, you just got to be nice and you got to be cool, and especially out on the road, you're dealing with road people. They're different. Yeah, they're different, man. They're not very sensitive to your needs. Let's say that. So it can be a little rough around the edges, but if you got thick skin, you're usually all right.
So where'd you go after Casey and the Sunshine Band?
So after I stopped Casey, I wanted to form Centropolis. Actually, I got married. The reason I left KC was because I had a son. Honestly, I was a little tired of the band. Not the band, but I was tired of the management. They weren't very, it's not nice. Not a very just not a very nice group. So I said, okay, that's cool. I definitely have the choice to stay or go. So I went, and I became a dad. I was married, and I started Centropolis. From there, I just started playing around Jax. I never really got my footing in Jacksonville as far as a player, working here. As far as a player goes, you got to go somewhere and stay there for about 5 years until you really start working.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's how long it takes to really kind of get in with someone or somewhere, and at least to get to know the people in the area. I mean, there's even now, I've been playing here so long, there's still people I don't know. Hey, I got a band. You want to be in it? I'm like, well, hey, who are you? It's just, it's like that. So yeah, so I came back, started doing that. Basically was a band dad for, maybe 4 years. And then I got separated, went to live on my own and for a while, and then started just kept playing. And then someone said, hey, can you do a week in Colorado with us? I was like, yeah, sure.
And now, what was that, a week where?
It was like it was a tour. It was a 2-week-long tour that MoFro had about 2-3 years ago. But I'd say like maybe 6-7 years ago, I got called to do a gig in Boston with them, and it was really fun. And then I did a gig in San Diego with them, and it was really fun. Just one. And then after that, years went by, And then I'd say 2-3 years ago, they called me again and said, can you come out for 2 weeks? And I was like, yeah.
Right.
So I went out for 2 weeks, and then maybe a few months later, they were like, hey, can you come out for another week? I was like, yeah. So I went out there again, and everything built up and started writing a few things here and there for him as far as foreign lines go. And then it just became the point to where as soon as we get a space, you're in. So it's like, okay, so that's kind of the thing right now is as soon as we have space, you're coming with us. I was like, okay, great.
That's interesting. Yeah. So you not only did you have to network to get your in, but then you had to prove yourself over and over and over again to get the invite.
Exactly. Like. And you got to be nice. You got to be be cool, and you got to be nice. You got to be able to hang. You can't make people mad. You can't make people irritated. You can't overtalk politics and religion. You got to be real sort of careful. And that's the other, I don't want to curse, but that's the other pain in the A about it.
Now, what other bands did you play for as well? Because didn't you play for, I think you said Gloria Gaynor and a couple other Sister Sledge?
Yeah, Gloria Gaynor, Sister Sledge, Tavares. There was a couple tours we were supposed to go on, but it didn't happen. Let me see. Oh, I played for Ray Charles, man, before he died, maybe 6 months before he died. That was a great show. Played for Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons. That was awesome. That's like another band I was not infatuated with, but used to listen to. God, I can sing. So now here I am playing for him, and that was great. I played for Bernadette Peters, Linda Eder.
So it sounds like a lot of your income would ebb and flow with the number of gigs and how long they are, correct? I mean, it sounds like it's not always steady.
Yeah, it's steady. It's steady stuff you want. That's why I always preach lessons and the weddings. A lot of the club bands here, any musician will tell you, clubs are a pain in the butt when you're getting older because you don't really want to stay out that long and you don't want to make that little money.
Right.
Simply for the socialization. So I could care less nowadays about socializing. I'm just like, look, I want to work, and I want to work hard. So, yeah, that's why I play with this bread and butter band, because they're all my friends. We all went to UNF, and we've all known each other for 20-plus years, and it's just a great band, Right. You don't want to get out of it.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you're like, yeah, I'm cool where I'm at, you know what I mean?
Right. And then your lessons as well, so you supplement.
Mm-hmm. Been teaching for about 7 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, and then a lot of my teachers go on to Don Zentz. I teach a lot of Don Zentz's students from PA, and when he was at Bowles, and Maggie Vance. Matt Vance was my sax teacher at FCCJ, and he's now with Boozy and Hawk, or Buffet.
Okay.
I don't think Boozy and Hawk really exists anymore. He's with the Buffet company, and his wife teaches band at Bowles. And I have a lot of her students. So it's once you start teaching and people start knowing you're there, it's kind of a little cool community of people who can actually get along.
Right. So what is your typical day like? Sounds like it's not always the same.
Well, I teach 3 times a week, and then I gig Fridays and Saturdays pretty steadily. Sundays I'll do church. Thursdays I would love to get steady work on Thursdays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays would be great, man. Even Sundays, but those are hard to find because you get most of the time those gigs are taken up by guitar players and piano players.
Yep.
But I can play guitar and sing, so I'm trying to get a little solo act together at the moment to where I play and sing guitar, I play keys, sax, clarinet, and flute, something like that, just to kind of make a little bit of extra cash. But the thing, my son is moving to Ireland this Saturday. He'll be flying out to go to school there. My son has autism.
Okay.
So he's slightly on the spectrum, but the schools here for any sort of special education are not schools. They're basically babysitting companies.
Right.
And you don't want that. I mean, I wish nobody had to go through what you got to go through here as far as the education system for special ed, let alone regular ed.
Right.
So my wife was born and raised in Dublin, and she was doing research about autistic education, and lo and behold, Dublin pops up as the first country to ever make autistic education as big of a deal as regular education is. And they're like one of the top 5 education systems in the world now.
Oh, wow.
I think Finland's number 1 or something. So now we've got a good place for him to go over there. He's got an advocate. He's got like a special education officer that's going to search for schools for him within 5 miles, first 10 miles, then 15 miles from his house that they've already secured over there in Dublin. And it's just an altogether better deal for him. But he's going to be moving on Saturday, so that's going to free up a lot of my time. But most of the time, it's being dad during the day and then just playing or teaching at night at the moment.
Okay.
Hopefully, if JJ Gray calls, I'll be touring. That's my goal. Get on the road. And getting out on the road is great because you get to meet other players, sure, other people, sure. But what I really want to do is get out there and start meeting repair guys and guys who make mouthpieces, and you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Some of the
specialized
experts.
I met this dude in LA, man, and look what he did. I'm like, man. I'm like, you stink, dude. That's what I want. I bought the mouthpiece I'm currently playing on. I bought in New York when I was on tour with the Sunshine Band because brass players, they don't want a reed player who comes in with a dark sound. They want you to have a nice, tinny, edgy sound that can sort of meet with them and they want, there's a lot of that stuff. So if you're out of tune and you got a dark sound and you're not shooting through enough, they get irritated. So
right.
So I went and got a mouthpiece that blew through the walls, and I was like, all right, this thing will work. And it was a wooden mouthpiece, actually, made by a guy named Fred LaBelle, who lives in French, or a German guy, who lives in, I think he's French, lives in New York City. He's got a little warehouse there.
Well, before we move on to our next question, let's take a moment to hear from our sponsors. Do you enjoy your job and find it fulfilling? Or do you spend more time wondering what if instead of what's next? If so, contact Career Spa. Career Spa has extensive programs and curriculum and understands the challenges faced by individuals in transition. They can teach these success practices to be mastered for an effective job search. Answer that what if question by contacting Career Spa and asking their experts, what's next? Contact Career Spa at careerspa.net. Talent acquisition is key to building a successful organization. Talent Connections is a professional services firm that specializes in recruiting, including executive search, contract recruiting, talent acquisition consulting, and recruitment process outsourcing. Whether you are an individual or a Fortune 100 company, Talent Connections can connect you with success. Contact them at talentconnections.net. Welcome back. We just learned what you wanted to be when you grew up, which was a musician, and we learned what you're doing today, which is a musician, which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Well, if you could do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Differently as a musician?
Just your career as a musician in general.
Oh, well, I've always felt that I was meant to do what I'm doing. You know what I mean? There's sort of a spiritual sixth sense of knowing that, yes, this is what you're supposed to be doing, now get better. So I definitely think I chose the right profession. I definitely think you have to get to know the profession. You know what I mean? So be careful what you choose. I mean, if you're born into it, kind of like I felt I was. I'm not born into it, but I really felt like you're supposed to do this. So
right.
That's what I did. But you got to, especially the music business, you got to kind of see what's out there, and you got to kind of see how far you really want to go as far as everything, socially, professionally, technically, everything. How far do you want to go? What do you see yourself doing? What do you think you could do, And that all relates to practice and taking care of yourself and being healthy. And because when you get to your 40s, you start looking at a lot of musicians that haven't taken care of themselves, and a lot of them just don't have a lot of time left because of it,
Right.
So that's one thing you really got to look out for, because it's cool as a musician. You can play until you're 90. There is no, oh, well, I got to retire. No, you never have to retire from music. You can do it the whole life. And that's the cool thing, because I'll never master. I will never master music. I know that. That's the other cool thing. I can work my whole life and really have something to work for, instead of going, okay, I made it. Now what do I do? There will be never any of that.
Right.
Yeah, there's always a level above me. So that's what I enjoy about it. I love seeking the next level. I love seeking out other players who do the same thing. As long as you seek out people and players who think like you, you'll be fine. And actually, you want to seek out people who maybe have a harder drive than you, or are even driven and really want to get into the business side of it, because that's cool too. Because that's when you really start putting it all together and making soup.
Right.
If you really want the truth, once you get into the business and really start being able to, okay, so I can write something and put it here, and it will just basically revolve. And then if I want to do this, I can put it here. But if I know this guy can help me put it here. That's all it is. It's basically like any other business, getting to know people, being cool, and coming up with a good product, because if your product sucks, then they will not buy it.
Right. Yeah, and I think you mentioned before, you listed off a string of names that I think were kind of your mentors, and I think that's a big piece of it, especially for music.
Yeah, I had exceptional teachers, yeah.
I think, I was a music guy. Obviously, that's how we met, and I had dreams of playing in the Boston Pops, driving my 1969
Sweet
Mach 1, living in a brownstone. And
You were a good French horn player, though.
Yeah, thanks, man. I think
You were a good French horn player.
I appreciate it.
And trombone player. I remember you on both, actually, yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I think what hurt me was once I got out of high school, I didn't have that mentor. And my private lesson teacher was going through a divorce, and he was just not a very nice guy. And I think it just, and then I was, had the mindset of, I don't want to work every Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, that kind of thing. So I think if I had a better mentor, I would have, or seek them out myself, it would have been totally different.
Right. That wasn't right out of high school, though. I mean, right out of high school, I was basically thrown in the tank like you were.
Yep.
Just like, here you go, fish, swim. It's a big ocean. I'm like, you're telling me, dude. What do I do now? I don't know. Hey, how do you do this? I don't know. There was a lot of that, because my dad was gone. Everybody was gone except my mom, and she didn't know anything about the music business or anything a lot, really. And so I just was like, okay, you're here to fend for yourself. And that's it. So fending for yourself is scary because they're not nice. Like I said, man, until you develop some thick skin, they're not very nice, man.
Yeah.
Especially when you were me. You know what I looked like, so I was a pure target. But when I started playing, they were like, oh, okay, we'll take you.
Right.
Are you sure? So yeah, man, it was, and then once I got on the cruise ships, I started exercising, and that's when I really lost all the weight. So it took me like 2 years, but.
Well, when you're at sea for 5 or 6 hours and you've been on that boat for a year and a half, you're probably looking for some productive things to do, I would imagine.
Depends on who you are, man. There's plenty of people who sat in their cabins all day. I was
true.
Like, I can't. I must venture, and then, just surrounded myself by people like that. And it was cool. The other thing about the ships was, here, if you have any not weird, but if you have anything visually off about you, you know what happens here. If you're big, if you got a weird nose, if you got anything, a hair lip or anything, they're going to make fun of you. Out there, they didn't do that. They just accepted you and you went on. And a lot of, I'd say for the first year, I had that whole sort of paranoia that somebody was going to start, of course somebody's like, hey, fatty, or hey, you suck, or hey, look at you suck, because that's just basically what happened my whole life. Going into the cruise ships and meeting people from Europe and, Asia, everywhere. It was like, hey, how are you? You're like, good, I'm fat, so what? And they're like, don't care.
Right.
That's
awesome.
And then it was like, oh, okay, they don't, people shouldn't do that, and they don't care. So a lot of things, just growing up, realizing nobody was there to tell me, kind of like nobody was there to mentor you. There was nobody to mentor me, nobody, until I actually went and sought after somebody. So I had to basically do this, no mentor, but I went anyway, and then I just kind of dove into a big, large ocean, and I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
I get it. And then, so it was fun. The cruise ships were probably the biggest eye-opener for me, because you were kind of a mini rock star on this,
that's true. Yeah.
This floating city. It's like a floating city, whatever you want to call it. And it was neat, man. You got a lot of attention, and also there was a lot of positive attention. They were like, hey, just people, like I said, people accepting you. So that gave me the courage to start working out, to practice more. Gave me the courage to ultimately leave and go to college, which I knew I always wanted to do, but I wasn't quite ready when I got out of high school. I didn't want to go to school after high school. I just wanted to go work.
Right.
So,
if there's someone who wants to do what you do, what advice would you give them? Because, you've had quite a different career path. What advice would you give someone who would like to be a professional musician?
Depends on how old you are. Start early and practice a lot, man. Start early and play. Play every day, and hang around the people who are better than you, and look for a good teacher. Always take a private lesson if you're in band at school. It was different when we were kids, because band was every day, and jazz band was every day, and everything was every day. Now you get a couple times a week after school, and there's all these kinds of budget cuts going on. So now they require you to take a private lesson with the band. If you're in band, you're required to go and take a private lesson outside.
Wow.
So if that was required by us, we already had that, though. We had all that band, plus we had Don Zentz teaching us privately. So we were, that was a win-win situation. That's why I was so able to go. That's why I didn't have to go to college before I went on cruise ships, because I was able to play.
Right.
You know, I had some sort of foundation. I didn't know a lot, you know, I really didn't, but I could play.
Right.
So went out there and they were like, "Oh yeah, cool, man. We haven't had a player like you in a while." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me. You for real? There's got to be good players out there." And he goes, "No, they're not."
Right.
Really
What was your
no, we're keeping you.
What was your soprano solo that you played throughout your junior year? Coconut something. Oh,
coconut champagne. Yeah.
Coconut
you know what's funny is when I made All-State Jazz Band my senior year, Bill Prince was the guest adjudicator, whatever you want to call him, and he conducted the band that year, and the band was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I still know like 3 or 4 of the guys. In fact, the lead alto player in that band is now, he took Bunky Green's place at UNF, Todd Del Judas.
Wow.
I mean, he's now the sax instructor at UNF. So that band was exceptional. And not just that, Dennis de Blasio from Maynard's band, the one that did the Barry solo on Coconut Champagne, was our guest soloist. It's funny you say that.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and he plays amazing flute. And him and Bill Prince got up and did St. Thomas on flute. And then I'd never seen Bill Prince play like that, because afterwards he goes, "Hey, man, that guy tried to pipe me." I said, "Bill, nobody can pipe you, man." He goes, "That's not the point, man. He just got up and tried to pipe me." And I was like, "Well, trust me, you did not get piped." He goes, No. He goes, "But that was weird." I was laughing. I was like, "Well, awesome. Bill, you didn't get piped. Let's just say that. I heard the whole thing, and it was absolutely awesome."
Well, I know you touched on this earlier, but are there any current projects you're working on that you would like to share?
Yes, my new album, my new self-titled album. Well, it's not self-titled. It's the Kenny Hamilton album. It's called Amoroso, and basically I'm just writing about, I'm trying to get people to, with so much crap going on in the world, I'm trying to get people together again with music, with my music. So straight-ahead jazz, to me, I love straight-ahead jazz. I love playing it. I love writing it. I love it, but I'm not a fan of the community, because they're super pompous and they can get real just elitist and stupid. And then when a real jazz guy comes along, he looks at you like, "Are you guys kidding?" You know what I mean?
Right.
So
yep.
I kind of stay away from the I just don't go out of my way to get into the straight ahead scene here in Jacksonville. But I was just a part of the Jack Hurd big band recording that Bill Prince led not too long ago, and that band was probably one of the best big bands I've ever been a part of. So I do jazz around here, but very seldomly,
right,
simply for that reason.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's cool. When is that coming out?
But my project is a smooth jazz project, because as many elitist jazz guys make fun of smooth jazz, I love it, man. I love the groove. I just think a lot of it is kind of lame. You know what I mean? I think when people write smooth jazz, a lot of times it can really come out sort of boring and soft and kind of lame. And that's what I didn't want. I said, if I'm going to do a smooth jazz album, I don't want it soft. And I used another word for it, but I didn't want it soft.
Right.
I wanted to make sure that you felt it, and it was bumping, and it was smooth, and it was just something you wanted to listen to all the way through. So that was kind of my goal for that, and it turned out freaking awesome. And it should be out sometime at the beginning of next year. At the very moment, the guy who produces me is building a mega studio, man. He had been he bought like $120,000 worth of equipment while we were recording, just at the end of the recording process. And I was like, "Oh my God, man." He said, "Yeah, it's getting there. And every time, we had access to all this boutique equipment from his buddy in Daytona, because he runs the recording school down there. And so it was great. Everything came together very, very well. So he's opening a big mega studio, believe it or not, in Elkton. But the house they got it's like a mansion house they got, and they got it for a steal because it needed a lot of work.
Right.
But it's also in Elkton. So, yeah, like in between Palatka and Hastings and St. Augustine. Like,
that's why you got a good deal.
That's right. And they're basically doing all the housework right now, but the house also has a barn in the back, big, huge barn with a building connected to it. And I think that's going to be used as the studio, and the house is basically just going to be used as a place for musicians to come and sleep, and have a nice place to be while you're recording. But man, he's going to be doing all that through the year, and I believe the beginning of next year. But I think I told him I wanted to work there, and he was like, "Oh hell yeah, you can work there as soon as we're done, man." I was like, even before, if you need help with anything, he's like, "Oh sure." So I think next year we'll start up. Basically, everything's done now with the album. All the tunes are written. Everything's mixed and mastered. I've got the copyrights are done. I loaded up with BMI. Got to join BMI or ASCAP, one of those. I like BMI because it's smaller and they really deal towards the college scene. And then you got to load it up on TuneCore. And when you load it up on TuneCore disperses your music to iTunes, Spotify, Rhapsody, everywhere, LinkedIn. There's like 5 different online entities that you want to get on at TuneCore. Basically, when you sign up for them, boom, they register it all up there for you. So you're like, oh, well, that's great.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to put it on Pandora, and I'll put it on, Spotify, and I'll put it on everywhere else. Just make sure people can have access to it. But yeah, it's mainly for online retail, I'd say.
Okay.
So shoot, if somebody wants me to perform, I'll be glad to perform. But
right.
It's mainly just for that. Trying to make money, I guess. From Jacksonville, if you want to go to the level above where this place is capable of taking you, you got to kind of do that. So.
All right. Well, cool.
But it should be out the beginning of next year, and it sounds very, very good.
Okay. Yeah, when it comes out, we'll shoot out a link and update. So that's awesome. With most journeys, success largely depends on reliable transportation, and I'm a big car guy. Could you tell us what was your first car?
The car you first drove, man, a 65 Mustang. Dark blue, midnight blue, pony interior. Didn't run so great all the time, but...
And that was actually the first Mustang I ever drove, so thank you for that experience.
I know. Shoot. I'd let anybody drive that car. Like I said, it wasn't... I had no clue on how to fix anything, you know what I mean? But I did know that car was cool.
Yeah, and so I'm glad...
driving that car actually gave me some cool points around school, but not too many.
Well, and I'm glad you forgot it, but I did try to hotwire your car once, and I burnt out the starter solenoid, which apparently I did replace. So sorry about that. Even though you forgot about it, that is a memory seared into my brain. All right, well, what is your dream car?
My dream car. Well, I drive a truck right now. Probably another. I would probably want another classic car. Maybe a '66 fastback, or I always said I wanted two. I wanted a convertible and I wanted a fastback. But that might be a little overkill on the Mustang thing.
Well, one perk to some jobs is a company car. So if I had all the money in the world, I would buy you a cool company car. And the car I picked for you, this is a one of one. It might still exist. People are trying to find it, but it's Jim Morrison's 1967 GT500 Shelby Mustang. That's the car I try to get for you.
Oh, God. Thank you. Shelby and having GT500 on it, I would take that dude. I would dream about that car.
What's ironic is it was pretty much the same color as your coupe. I think it's Night Mist Blue. It was a dark blue. And apparently it was the only car he ever owned. And they thought he wrapped it around a tree or something, but it is missing, and people are still looking for it. So there's been a lot of rare Mustangs that popped up recently. The Bullet Mustang popped up, and they had this Shelby prototype popped up last week that's worth like $3.5 million. So these cars that people thought were gone are popping up. So maybe this car will pop up, and it could be your cool company car one day.
Cool. I will search for it.
And it has a musical background, so that's really cool. Yeah, thanks so much for taking us on your journey today. What's the best way for our listeners to learn more about you and your musical exploits here?
Well, I'm on Facebook. I don't do a lot of personal stuff on Facebook, but I do my business stuff on there, and Instagram as well. I'm also on Spotify with Centropolis, and you can find me on Pandora under the name Ryan Leroy. Ryan, RyanLeroy. The guy who records me, Ryan, I call him Leroy. We all call him Leroy. He's my producer, but he's also a great drummer. And he's the one that he started recording smooth jazz maybe about 6 years ago, and he used me on all of his stuff. And I was like, man, I can record this stuff. Jeez. I mean, it doesn't seem like that hard to... If you're a good writer and you're a good musician, then you can write good smooth jazz tunes, you know what I mean? You just got to get into the style. But I was like, man, I can do this, you know what I mean? So years later, after I recorded both of his albums, I just got together and said, hey, man, let's get together. He was like, okay. And I said, dude, I want to record an album. He's like, cool. And I was like, so how much is it going to cost? And he goes, well, what are you talking about? He goes, you just did 2 albums for free for me, man. He goes, I'm going to do it for free. And I was like, oh, yeah, baby. Oh, yeah. So that's another thing. Sorry, I know the interview is almost over, but another thing, if musicians want to really get to another place, trade, work and trade. Like if you got a producer who's a really good producer and he needs something, play for him, he'll record you. You know what I mean?
Right. No, that's a good way to do it. Trade.
Yeah.
Well, cool, Kenny. Thanks so much for your time today.
You're welcome, bud. Thanks for calling.
Thank you for listening to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. Where will our next adventure take us? Subscribe to find out. If you know of someone who has a cool career story or occupation, contact Greg through Instagram at Greg Stanley LFO. That's GregStanley LFO. And we will see you soon as we learn from others together.